Podcast Network. One voice, everywhere.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Lucas, and today we're stepping away from the noise, not to escape it, but to understand what lies underneath it. We're exploring a kind of poetry that does not always behave the way we expect poetry to behave. It doesn't always rhyme, it doesn't always explain itself. Sometimes it refuses to speak at all. This is abstract poetry, the kind of works in the space between words, in the breath or in the breath between lines, in the silence that says more than language ever could. Today's episode is called When Silence Becomes a Language, and we're going to sit with the pause, the empty spaces, and the unspoken emotions that carry meaning cannot hold. This isn't about understanding within the mind, it is about listening with something deeper. So settle in, let the noise of the day fall away, and let's begin. This is a moment just before a poem begins when the page holds its breath. That moment is not empty, it's a charge with everything that might be said and everything might choose to remain hidden. Abstract poetry lives that charged silence. It does not rush to fill the void. It understands the void. It's not the void at all. It's a language waiting to heard by those patient enough to listen. We are taught from childhood that words are power, that the name is something, it's control it to define it, to bring it into existence. But abstract poetry asks a dangerous question. What if words are also kind of prison? What if the act of naming something actually limits it, pins it down, or strip it of its mastery? Think about the last time you felt something you could not describe. Not wouldn't describe, could not. The feeling was too big, too tangled, too ancient for vocabulary you had available. In that moment, you were standing in the trajectory and territory abstract poetry calls home. You were fluent in language that has no dictionary, no grammar textbook, or no official translation, and yet you understood it perfectly. Silent has its own grammar, its own punctuation. A comma is not same as a period. A pause that lasts 3 seconds is not the same as a pause that lasts 10. The white space between stanzas is a paragraph break in a story the conscious mind cannot summarize, but the body somehow recognize. We read silence the way we read weather instinctively, deeply, without being thought. Abstract poetry trusts the reader in a way traditional poetry often does not. It does not hold your hand, it does not explain the metaphor. It places a few words on a vast white field and says, the rest is up to you. This is a laziness. This is the deepest form of respect. It's a poet saying, I believe you bring something to this page that I cannot provide. I believe your silence will speak to mine. What is the shape of pause? If you could hold it in your hands, what would it feel like? Would it be smooth like a river stone or jagged like a broken glass? Would it have a weight? Would it be warm from the body that just stopped speaking or cold from the distance that opened up between two people who suddenly ran out things to say? There is an architecture to absence. The Japanese understand this. They have concept called ma. the meaningful pause. The space between things gives those things their shape and significance. Without the silence between notes, music would noise. Without white spaces around painting, the image would have no focus. Without a pause between words, poetry would be relentless assault rather than invitation. Abstract poetry builds cathedrals out of what is there. It understands that the empty space is not a mistaken. It's something the poet forgot to feel. It's the point. It's where the reader enter the poem. It's where meaning is not delivered but discovered, not imposed, not uncovered, not spoken but remembered. Consider the Kasora, the deliberate pause within the line of verse. In the hands of abstract poet, a Kasara becomes a doorway. The reader steps through it, and suddenly the poem is no longer on the page. It's in the room. It's in the chest. It's in the memory of something that happened years ago and was never fully processed. The word is either side of the pause or just the frame. The pause itself is the picture. What life is in the right space? Everything the poet could say, everything the poet was afraid to say, everything the poet knew the reader would need to supply from their own life, their own losses, and their own loves that never made into language. The white spaces is not empty. It's full. Ghosts, and the ghosts have names you will recognize if you sit still long enough. We spend too much of our lives feeling silence. We turn on the products and music and television. We scroll through feeds that never end. We talk to fill awkward gaps at the dinner parties. What are we so afraid of? We might be here if we stop feeling the space and simply let it exist. Abstract poetry is art of letting it exist. It's a courage to stop taking, to start listening to what always there beneath the noise. Have you ever noticed that your body understands silence before your brain does? You may walk into a room and something feels wrong. No one has said anything. Nothing is visibly changed, but your shoulders tighten. Your stomach drops. Your breath becomes shallow. Your body has already read the silence, already interpreted the pause, already translated and spoken into a language of sensation that predates words by millions years. Abstract poetry speaks directly to this bodily intelligence. It bypasses the analytical mind, the part of you that wants to phrase and categorize and explain. It goes straight to God, to the spine, to the place where shivers. Read it with your nervous system. You read it with the part of to you that knew fear before you had word for fear, that knew love before you had name for the person standing in front of you. There's a poem by abstract poet that consists of a single who plays in the center of an otherwise blank page. The word is something ordinary, something you have heard thousand times, but surrounded by all the white spaces, the word becomes strange. It becomes new. It becomes terrifying or beautiful or both. That's what the silence does. It makes the familiar unfamiliar again. It restores the weight that overuse has worn away. Unspoken emotions have physical density. You can feel they in a room. Grief that has not been expressed sits in the corners like fog. Anger that has not been voiced hums in the walls like electricity. Joy that has not been shared trembles in the air like the moment before an thunderstorm. Abstract poetry doesn't try to capture these emotions in words. It creates a container for them. It builds a room out of silence and invites you to sit inside it with whatever you've been carrying. Think about the last conversation where someone said, I'm fine, and you knew they were not. The word fine was not the communication, the pause before it, the pause after it, and the way their eyes did not meet yours, the slight catch in the breath. Those were the poem. These or those were the abstract verses telling you everything you need to know. The words were just the frame, the silence held the truth. There is a kind of listening that's nothing to do with ears. It's the listening to do with the middle of the night when you walk up and don't know why. It's the listening you do when you're standing at the edge of something, a decision, a loss, a transformation, and you're waiting for a signal that may never come. Abstract poetry is written for the kind of listening. It's written for a person who has exhausted. Language needs something else, something older or something quieter, something that does not need to explain itself to be true. Let's sit inside and pause together. Not a metaphorical pause, a real one. Right now, for the next 5 seconds, nothing will be said, no words will be filled the space. No explanation will rescue us from discomfort of silence. Did you mind rush to feel it? Did you wonder if something had gone wrong? Did you notice your own breathing? The pause is a poem. Everything you experience inside it is the meaning of the poem. The silence spoke. You listen, a conversation a chord that not transcript could capture. Abstract poetry is full of those pauses, not just a visual white spaces on the page, but the emotional white space, the places where poet deliberately withholds closure, denies resolution, leaves the wound open. This is not cruelty, it's honesty. Life does not always resolve, grief does not always end with acceptance, love does not always conclude with a wedding or funeral. Sometimes things just stop. Sometimes the silence at the end of the story is the truest part of the story. We have a cultural obsession with answers. We want the diagnosis, the solution, the five-step plan, the takeaway. Abstract poetry refuses this. It offers not answer but presence. It says, I will sit with you in not knowing. I will not cheapen your experience by pretending it can be summarized. I will hold the silence with you until it becomes less terrifying and more like home. The empty spaces in a poem are like the rest in a piece of music. They are not absence of sound, they are the presence of different kind of sound. The sound of the room, the sound of your own heartbeat, the sound of air moving through the space where words used to be. A composer once said that music is the silence between the notes. The same is true with abstract poetry. The poem is the silence between the words. Everything else is just scaffolding. What does it mean to speak without speaking? I look across a crowded room, a hand placed on the shoulder at a funeral, a door left lightly open, a letter never sent, a sentence that trails off in ellipses that never returns. These are the vocabulary of abstract poetry. These are the units of meaning that can be reduced to syllables. The poet works with this the way a painter works with the negative space, understanding that what is not there defines what is. There are kind of courage required to leave things unsaid. We are so desperate to be understood, we over explain. We add qualifiers. We restate the point three different ways. We feel very silent with just justification. Abstract poetry is a discipline of resisting this impulse. It's a practice of saying less so that more can be felt. It's the trust that reader does not need to be, well, blood gone with meaning, that they will find it on their own in the spaces she felt them. Some things are too heavy for language. This is not a failure of vocabulary. It's recognition that certain experiences exist outside the reach of words. the birth of a child, the moment of a terminal diagnosis, the instant you realize a relationship is over, the flood of memory triggered by smell you have not encountered in 30 years. Abstract poetry does not try to capture these experiences, it circles them. It builds the parameter of a silence around them and says, what inside this boundary cannot be spoken, but we can stand here together and know it there. The shape of an unspoken thing is not nothing. It has contours, it has edges, it casts the shadow across everything you'd say. When you talk about your day, but not about what's really weighing on you, the silence around that weight has a specific shape. The people who love you can feel it. The many not know what is it, but they know something is taking a space. Abstract poetry makes these invisible shapes visible. It draws the outline of the absence so you can finally see what you've been carrying. There are famous abstract painting that is just white canvas with the faint grid of pencil lines. Critics argue about whether it was really art, but the artist was not trying to represent anything. The artist was creating a space for the viewer to have an experience. The faint lines were just enough structure to hold your attention, while the silence, the white field, did a real work. Abstract poetry operates the same way. The few words on the page are just the pencil lines. The vast whiteness is where the poem actually happens inside you. What if we thought our own lives, as abstract poems? What if the gaps in our resumes and relationships that ended without closure? The years we cannot quite account for the grief we never fully process. What if those were not failures of narrative but essential white space? What if they were the past that gives the rest of our story its shape and a meaning? What if the silence in our life is not the void to be feared but language to be learned? Children understand abstract poetry instinctively. Before they thought to prefer explanation over experience, show a child a poem with only a few words surrounded by space and they won't ask it means. They feel it. They point to white spaces to say something that sounds like nonsense to adult ears, but it actually closer to the truth than any analysis. We lose this literacy. We are educated out of it. Abstract poetry, an attempt to recover what we know before we thought that we everything must be explained. There is silence that comes after a great pain that is different from all other silence. It's not empty, it's not a peaceful, it's a thick with everything that cannot be processed yet. It's a silence of a mind that has hit its limit and shut it down out of weakness, but out of mercy. Abstract poetry knows this silence. It does not try to break it. It does not out offer platitudes. It sits beside it, wordless, companion, a witness that demand nothing. Witness is an undervalued function of art. We think of poems as things to do something, inspire, educate, provoke. But sometimes the most important thing a poem can do is simply witness. To say, I see this. I acknowledge this exists. I will not look away. Abstract poetry is a particularly good at witness because it doesn't clutter the observation with commentary. It shows you the silence lest the silence testify. Think about the silence in your own life that have never been witnessed. The moment you decided not to say the thing that would happen changed everything. The grief you carried along because you did not want to burden anyone. The fear you swallowed because the leaders are not supposed to be afraid. Those silence are poems waiting to be written, not explained, not justified, not resolved, just held, just acknowledged, just given their own white spaces on the page. There's a tradition in some forms of abstract poetry where the Poet leaves blanks, literally blanks in the next underlines, empty brackets and bucket spaces for the readers to insert their own experience. This is not a gimmick, it's an act of profoundly humility. The poet is saying, my words can only you go so far. You must complete this poem with your own life, or you're not just the audience. You are the co creator. The silence is where your voice enters. How do you learn to read silence? The same way you learn everything else, through practice, through attention, through willingness to be uncomfortable. Start small. The next time someone finishes a sentence, don't immediately respond. Let the silence exist. Notice what rises in it. Notice the impulse to feel it. Notice what the other person does. That pause, however brief, is the poem. Read it. The world is very loud right now. It's designed to be loud. Algorithms compete for your attention, notification fragment for your focus. The news cycle never ends. In this environment, silence becomes radical. Choosing to sit with a poem that refuses to explain itself becomes an act of resistance. It's a declaration that you're still a human being capable of that, not just a set of eyeballs to be monetized. Abstract poetry is a refuge, but it's also a rebellion. There are relationships between silence and truth that we don't talk about enough. Lies requires words, deception requires explanation. The truth can afford to be quiet. The truth can sit in a room without defending itself. Abstract poetry trusts this. It doesn't argue, it doesn't persuade. It simply presents what is, with enough white space around it that you can see it clearly. And it trusts you to recognize the truth when you encounter it. What would happen if you treated your own inner life as an abstract poem? If you stopped trying to narrate every feeling, categorize every thought, explain every impulse? What if you let some things remain in the white space, felt but not defined, present but not pinned down? This is not avoidance. This is a different kind of wisdom. This is the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of the poem, the wisdom that knows not everything needs to become a sentence to be real. The unspoken emotion in a room full of people who love other but cannot find the words, the pause between the questions and the answer when everything hangs in the balance. The empty chair at the holiday table, the text message read but not responded to, the door closed but not locked, those are the abstract poems. They are the invitations to listen differently, to read the silence, to trust that what is being said is often the most important thing in the room. We've been told that communication is about clarity, that the call is to be understood, but what if the call is something else? What if the call is connection? And connection is sometimes requires not understanding, but simply being present. Abstract poetry doesn't try to make you understand, it tries to make you present. It clears the space and invites you into it, not to figure anything, but out to experience something fully, including the experience of not knowing. So here's the invitation, not a challenge, not a task, just an invitation. The next time you encounter a poem that does not make immediate sense, don't reach for analysis. Don't ask it what it means. Just sit with it. Let the words that they are there for do the quiet work. And let the words that are not there do theirs. Notice the spaces between the lines. Notice your own breathing. Notice what rises you that has nothing to do with the poem and everything to do with what brought to it. That is the poem. That is the language of silence. You've been speaking it you for whole life. You just didn't know there was a name for it. When silence becomes a language, you realize you have been bilingual or bilingual since birth. You've been always known how to read and pause, interpret the empty space, and feel the weight of what is being said. Abstract poetry didn't even this language. It simply created a gallery for it, a stage, a page, where a silence can be seen and felt and honored. The white space is not a void, it's a mirror. What you see in it yourself, what you hear in the voice you've been waiting for. It's never missing. It was just a very, very quiet, and now you know how to listen. And that brings us to the end of our today's episode. So when silence become a language, we explore how pauses, empty spaces, and unspoken emotions carry more meaning than words ever could. We've sat inside the white spaces together and discovered it was never empty. Abstract poetry reminds us that not everything needs to be explained to be true. Not everything needs to be said to be heard, and not everything needs to be resolved to be meaningful. If these episodes resonate with you, sit with it. Don't rush to the next thing. Let the silence after many voice fades be part of the experience. That silence is yours. It belongs to you. So listen to it. It might have something to say. Thank you for your being here. Until next time, keep listening to what is being said. That's where the real poetry lives. Welcome, people. See you soon.